All right, so I want to take a second here, take a few minutes, and it's kind of shifting gears again a little bit. We're still sticking with the what life would have been like as the Catholic Church is coming into the culture. And a comparison that I think is apt to make is between the medicine man, the traditional medicine man of Lakota culture, and the priest. Lakota and Catholic traditions have similar understandings of the relationship between spiritual powers and the officiant. What I mean by that is that the medicine man was never the source of power, he was a conduit through which the power worked. Frank Foolscrow, he's Black Elk's nephew, um, a famous Lakota ceremonial leader, called the medicine man a hollow bone. Right, it's the bone through which the if you ever seen when the Lakota use like bone as a whistle to blow in through, right, and that whistle is the historically would have been the voice of the Great Spirit, the hollow bone, the conduit through which the spirit works. So the Lakota were fascinated and seemed to have almost a mystical understanding of the Catholic priest, right? I mean, we've already talked about they sort of reverently referred to them as the black robes, which is already saying like we understand that these are people that are set apart, that serve a different purpose. One of the things, again, we're talking about how they seem to almost mystically make sense of the priest. They really were fascinated by and understood why the vow of celibacy was taken by priests. Now, there was no equivalent to that among their medicine men, but the concept, when they learned about it, immediately made sense to them. That, oh, yeah, these are men that are set apart for the important work of communicating and bringing Wankantanka to the people and bringing Wankantanka's good medicine to the people. So the whole concept of celibacy is yet another way in which these men were set apart, which made sense to the Lakota mind. So they got that right away. They took these men into their tribes. They even took them into their homes. I mean, many of the Jesuits were adopted into the familial rituals, and they were given names. For example, here, let me go through my list. For example, Father John Jutz became Iron Gaze. Father Henry Westrop became Little Al. Father Joseph Liebender became Little Father. Father Billings became Good Horse. Father Digman became Blackbeard. Father Bushell became Black Eagle. Um, let's see. Father Schilling became Littlefoot. Father Grodigers became Redbeard, and so on and so forth. So once they bring you into the family, once they give you a name, you're given a name. This would be your name among the tribe. You are Lakota at that point, and a lot of these Jesuits were adopted. So it just goes to show that there is something unique about, well, there's something unique about the way that the Catholic Church is set up that speaks to people who are living close to the land. I mean, Western culture has a tendency to look at these type of people as, because they're not as book read as us, maybe they don't have the centuries of scholasticism and later empiricism and all of these things, that they're somehow less than us or lacking what we lack. But in so many ways, these people that are close to the land like this are more intelligent than us in those ways than we tend to be. And something like the Catholic Church, something like the Catholic Church, when it enters into a culture like that, the culture just takes to it. So now on a practical level, though, there were of course some real differences and some things that the Jesuits kind of had to suppress as far as practices of the medicine men go, and just practices of the culture in general. So just to give you some examples here, right? The Jesuits made two distinctions about the work of the medicine men. They told the Lakota, at least the ones that were baptized, that the chants and the sort of dubious rituals like tricking patients about these procedures that they were performing were unacceptable. The problem was that the medicine men were offering things that were contrary to what the priest was offering. The priest is here giving the Lakota people the efficacious sacraments that were instituted by Jesus Christ. The medicine men were invoking spirits. So in that area they were rightly quite strict. But now in the areas of what would we would call more legitimate medicine, I've mentioned this in the last talk that that the medicine men were exceptional in their knowledge of the plants and herbs, and things like the sweat bath, and even some of the more symbolic rituals like the smoking of the pipe, which would bring peace to the people. They were very, very lenient about this and did not require that the Lakota conform to the norms of American Catholicism. Now, this is an area that I know that many of you are interested in. It's people have asked me about it, and I I have quite a bit I'd like to say about it, but it's a complex topic, and I can't say that the church has really worked out as far as a science, a truly effective, correct, and method that's applicable to all situations. What I'm talking about here is for enculturation, of course. Now there are some good guidelines out there, and while I'm mostly knowledgeable in the Franciscan tradition, I will willingly admit that at least at one time, that the Jesuits were kind of the masters of this. I mean, for one thing, one of the reasons it's so complex is because as you're moving across different cultures, the necessities change. I mean, when you are a Jesuit going into China, it's a different situation than going into the plains of America. So, whereas in China, the Jesuits took on the robes of a Confucius scholar, in Native American culture, they basically remained themselves, and that alone set them apart for where the Lakota people respected and understood them. And the Jesuit successes, I mean, to give them credit where credit's due, were really without equal. And in many senses, they kind of became victims of their own success in some areas of the world. And that's both by bringing on um, it's both by bringing on the ire of the local people who were not necessarily wanting the Jesuits to be successful. That's also from other Catholics um, who at times were maybe jealous of the Jesuit success, but there's also the tendency to maybe slip into syncretism that has happened in some areas that the Jesuits have been blamed for. Now, as far as life among the Lakota, a few of the things that the Jesuits denounced as customs um, common to many nomadic tribes was a practice where they would. So, I mean, you're thinking about nomadic tribes, right? They have to pick up and they have to leave pretty consistently. One of the things that they would do is they would leave behind their sick and their elderly that couldn't, the infirm that could no longer move, and these people would often die horrible deaths of exposure. Now, I've read it's George, I think it what is his name, Caitlin. He was a American explorer that went and visited all the various tribes, and he painted some famous um, paintings of Native Americans. You may have seen them before, and he also wrote some journals. I've read his journals. I remember him bringing this practice up when he saw it. It might even have been among the Sioux that he saw it take place. He said it wasn't, there was an old man, and he said it wasn't that the tribe left him. The tribe actually, the family of the old man wanted him to come with them. The old man absolutely refused. He said, "I'm not going anywhere. I'm going to stay right here, and I will die here, and you guys go on." And he refused to go with them, so they left him behind. So there's probably some of that, but this is definitely a custom that the Jesuits denounced in their work with the Lakota. They also denounced the nearly ubiquitous tradition of retributive warfare, common among all the tribes. Now, when the Lakota were discussing surrendering to the American government, one of their concerns was that the ways in which young men made a name for themselves among the tribes, sort of the way that young men sort of entered into the tribe and society, was that they would go and make raids on the um, other tribes. And those raids would often lead to killings. And those killings would often lead to vengeance killings from the other tribe, and then you would have to have a vengeance killing against theirs. And it started this horrible cycle of vengeance killing and vengeance raiding. The Jesuits put a stop to that. The U.S. government actually put a stop to it too, we can see where the Jesuits were denouncing that, because it doesn't lead to anything. It's not, certainly not the message of the gospel. Even though Europeans haven't always lived up to the gospel message themselves in terms of violence and warfare. But nonetheless, it was pretty standard fare in the tribes. And I have a personal feeling that one of the reasons that reservation life was so devastating for the tribes was that there was never a good transition from that being the way that young men made their presence and made their name for themselves in their society and in their tribe. There was never a good transition from that in the reservation life. And in turn, the young men in the Native American tribes on the reservation turned to sort of unhealthy things, but we're going to talk about that in a future point. I mean, for example, though, the killings that were often involved in these vengeance were indiscriminate, between warrior and civilian, and they often involved the capture and torture of prisoners. I'm sure some of you are familiar with what scalping was. Let's see. The Jesuits also took issue with the medicine men attempting to work their esoteric medicine on converts. Now, they left alone those who were still pagan, but once you became Catholic, they were quick to put a stop to a medicine man attempting to chant or call upon the old spirits while interceding for a convert. This is we're going to talk about Black Elk next time, but there's sort of a famous story, and well, famous. I mean, there's the story of when he converts, and I'm actually going to save that for next time. But just keep this point in mind, right? That when you convert, the Jesuits saw you as a child of the church, and no longer were you to have these old medicine men. The old medicine men could treat you with the herbs, but they were not going to chant for the old spirits over you.